somewhere in Dreamland.
It looked like the complexion of a dead person in a casket.
Random memories of waking up in the night, knowing I'm not alone in the room.
We have 3 cities that all claim to be the UFO capital of the entire world.
So when she turned on the kid's light, it stopped walking.
My parents told me these things didn't exist.
They're a little more ominous, creepy, scary, and the question is there, what is this thing?
Hovering just inches from the window was literally is what you'd imagine a grave to be.
Never seen anything like this in my life.
I'm still left with more questions than answers.
Welcome back, dreamers. If you've had an encounter, please contact me at somedreamland@gmail.com or find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Somewhere in Dreamland Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please help it grow by subscribing, rating, reviewing, and sharing this episode with friends, family, and social media. Also, check out the new donation button on the show's main page and be on the lookout for the Dream Vault, an all-new members-only section with exclusive extra content. Tonight's show is a two-parter with guest Preston Dennett. Preston has been in the field of ufology and the paranormal for over 35 years, beginning his journey into the strange in 1986 when he discovered that his friends, family, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, Preston has become a MUFON Field Investigator, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of over 27 books and hundreds of articles about UFOs and the paranormal. So without further ado, grab your blankets, turn down the lights, get comfy, and let's fade away into
Dreamland.
Alrighty, sir. Well, I'm excited to have you on, Preston. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I can't wait for my audience to be able to hear some of the stories that you have and some of the things that you've collected.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, how long have you been in the field of ufology, and what exactly got you started? Pretty standard question. I think everybody asks you that, don't they?
Yeah. Gosh, when I look back, I'm kind of shocked. It's been a long time. Most of my life, actually, 35 years almost. It was really the pivotal event was November 17, 1986. At that time, I was very skeptical of UFOs and really anything paranormal at all. But there was this news story about a sighting over Alaska, a pretty famous sighting. Very well known, I think, in the UFO community, certainly, about a sighting over Alaska by Captain Kenju Toroshi. His plane was basically followed by 2 very large, walnut-shaped UFOs, alien craft, I'll call them, bigger than his commercial jet, and it was on radar. It was a big case, but on the news, they just kind of joked about it, laughed nervously, and moved on. But it intrigued me. I thought, well, this poor pilot, what a fool. He's throwing his life away over a lie or a misperception. This is kind of what I was thinking. And I remembered my brother Mark had said he'd seen a UFO. And that was a good, 7 or 8 years earlier, but I just didn't want to hear it back then. I was a pretty young man at this time. I'm 21 years old. So I go up to Mark. I'm like, Mark, did you hear about this crazy pilot? He said he saw a UFO. You said you saw one, right? He's like, yeah, you never listened to me. And I'm like, well, tell me what you think you saw, what you think you saw, right?
Right.
And he shocked me. I knew he wasn't lying when he described this very close-up sighting. He was with his 2 friends, Phil and Greg, and basically chased this metallic-looking saucer down the street for a good 15 or 20 minutes. He says they were real close up to it. It was treetop level, colored lights, metallic, had a dome, totally silent. Pretty much your classic case. I'm like, you're kidding? He's like, no, we passed other cars. They were watching it. No, call Phil, call Greg if you don't believe me. And it's not that I didn't believe him, but I did. I called Phil and I called Phil and Greg, and they're like, yep. They described basically the same thing. I'm like, huh. I'm like, really? I'm thinking, like, gosh, I just can't believe in this. I just can't believe it. But it was clear he wasn't lying or misperceiving, and I had no other explanation. So I started asking other people, and that was a big mistake because I found out. I mean, seriously, a lot of people I knew were having encounters or had encounters, or actually would soon have encounters.
Wow.
So, I mean, seriously, my friend Jason, would be a year later, he had a major encounter. A couple of family friends, Sylvia, she was a pilot, scuba diver, a good witness.
Yeah.
She had an egg-shaped object fly right over her house. Like, yeah, it was drawn outside. Me and my friend saw it. I'm like, you and your friend. Every person I talked to had another witness or multiple witnesses with them. My sister-in-law, people at work. I had a friend who had missing time. Someone at work had missing time. They were followed home from the library. So, yeah, it hit home for me, literally.
Wow, and then you got the bug right there, huh?
Yeah, and once you catch the bug, that's it.
True.
I mean, you got it. And I started checking out books. I'm like, I'm going to disprove these guys. I was mad. I was, not happy about this because, I don't know, I felt a little bit scandalized.
Yeah.
This wasn't really taken seriously. But I'm checking out these books, like, the Travis Walton incident, Betty and Barney Hill case, bunch of, Betty Andreasen, the Roswell incident. I'm like, man, what? There's a government cover-up? This has been going on for years. This is widespread. There's mountains of evidence. I ended up joining MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. Took their test to become a field investigator. It was a very difficult test, but I did well. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
Awesome. Now, did you have any personal experiences before that you didn't realize?
I don't think so. I don't know. I'm going to put a big question mark there. Because I do remember as a little kid having a weird incident where I don't know how to describe this other than I missed lunch. I fell asleep or something, but I didn't fall asleep. I just don't know what the heck happened. I don't normally talk about this, but you asked, so.
Right. Good.
So I'm like, and I look back on that and it keeps coming up in my head because I don't miss lunch. We had 6 kids in our family. We needed our food.
Right.
And so possibly I remember seeing pictures of mongoloid children, which are very much like Greys. And it was shocking to me because I got a really weird feeling looking at that. And I'm like, but it's just kind of very vague stuff like that. But I have to tell you, shortly after I got into this, I mean, really not long after, I did start having sightings. And some were like crazy close.
Interesting. So, yeah, that's interesting. I think that you may have had something going on there, man. I think there's still pieces of the puzzle out there for you to put together on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that because it is in my family. I mean, I do have a sister-in-law who saw Greys face to face, 10 feet away.
Wow.
That's can't be a coincidence. Her son, my nephew, had humanoids in his bedroom as a young kid. I made sure he didn't forget it. I remember I would always ask him about it, and then a couple of years later, as he's a young adult, I reminded him. He's like, "Oh my God, I completely forgot about that." I'm like, "Yeah, I bet you did." But saw UFOs. Well, I have another nephew, real close-up sighting of a UFO. My brother, of course, and get this. After he he chased this object, right? He was real close, a couple of 100 feet. That's a red flag for me. I've learned that if you're seeing a UFO and it's like 100 feet away, that's a red flag for a close encounter. This could be an actual onboard case. And it was some years later, he marries my other sister-in-law, who also had encounters face-to-face with ETs as a little girl. Which is, I'm like, okay, now I have two sister-in-laws.
Weird.
And she's like sitting next to him one day. This is when they're pretty young. And she's just kind of petting his arm. And she's like, what's this in your arm? And Mark looks down, and on the inside of his, I think it was his left elbow, there's this thing right under his skin, like a half matchstick sort of, like this object right under his skin. And he told me, and I felt, you could palpate it with your fingers, you could touch it. And I'm like, Mark, what the heck is this? He's like, when did you notice this? Like, we just now. I mean, not too long ago. I took him to a doctor who's also a UFO, a MUFON Field Investigator, actually. The doctor's like, oh my God, what the heck is this? I'm like, I don't know. We ended up getting it x-rayed. They couldn't tell what it is. It appeared to be a foreign body. They didn't think it was metallic. But they had no explanation for it, and it eventually just kind of disappeared.
Oh, it disappeared.
Yep.
I was going to ask if you ever got it taken out or if it disappeared.
No, I kind of regret, because it was right there on the surface. I mean, you couldn't see it, but you could, if you just felt it, you could feel it. It was a hard object. You could definitely feel it.
Now, did he have any other signs? Did he have like scoop marks or anything weird like that?
No. Did have a few alien dreams, but nothing that I would like. Wasn't laying on a table being examined or anything.
Right.
So I don't know, but it just interests me because that is something I've certainly heard from other people, these weird implant type things. And he did marry my sister-in-law, who does have all kinds of alien connections, I guess. She saw little blue humanoids as a young girl for 2 weeks coming into her bedroom.
Wow.
And she's like, what are you doing? And they told her. They said, we are recording your memories. And that
weird.
That was intriguing to me because that's not the first person who's told me that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yep, that's something they do. They're kind of very interested in our emotional makeup, our experiences, this sort of thing.
I wonder what they're using those memories for.
Hard to say. I can only speculate, but I think it's part of just their whole project of studying us.
Yeah. Well, that's weird, man. So how many cases would you say you've researched or investigated altogether? Take a while. It's got to be a guess, man, because there's no way you can possibly know.
No, I actually should have kept a logbook and counted. It's hundreds. It's easily hundreds. I've talked to thousands of people because, I go to these conventions and I'm not recording these. Most of them I don't record, but I'm certainly talked to thousands of what I would call contactees or experiencers. But a good 300-400, possibly more, full on, recorded interviews. I mean, shoot, I've written 28, might be 29. I'm somewhere around there, books, over 100 articles.
I was going to ask you how many. I'm reading one right now. I'm reading the wondrous 25 true UFO encounters, and I'm absolutely loving it so far.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, that's the latest. That one does contain my sister-in-law's encounter with the little blue guys.
I haven't got it that far yet, but I can't wait, man, because I'm really that first of all, the first story in that book was really awesome. I love that first story in that book.
Oh yeah, that's riveting. That's why I put it first, because lady, a teacher. I mean, she was very, what would I put? Just a good interview. She's really smart, very clear. Gave a great interview, wrote it down for me, the whole deal. And the reason she contacted me was because she was looking for information on what she saw. and couldn't find anyone anywhere who saw anything close to what she saw, which was basically, well, a 15-foot tall being, a praying mantis type being. And it turned out I did have a case from a Navy medic, of all people, who was taken on board a craft and did see actually 3 15-foot tall praying mantis type figures, ETs. That's what I think they are, ETs. I mean, I'm hands down a believer. I can't really prove it, but that's my assessment. What we're dealing with here is extraterrestrials.
I was going to ask you because there are so many theories out there as to what these things could be. And more often than not, most people think that when they think of alien, they think of the Greys. I don't think they realize that there are probably many different races and types of these creatures that are visiting us. And but there are theories out there, like, you got the interdimensional travelers. And,
yep.
There's lots of different, and a lot of them are fascinating, but I don't feel like any of those explain the whole story. You know what I mean? Like, the only one that really explains that would it be for it to be an extraterrestrial.
Yeah, that I totally agree. And there are a lot of theories. I mean, interdimensional beings. Okay, sort of lying, pretending to be ETs. So the demonic theory. There's people who are, very religious who believe they're demons. I ended up doing demonology research. I mean, I seriously did. I checked out all the books. I did a bunch of haunting research, bunch of ghost hunting, went out to haunted places, talked to people who had, possession experiences. It was some scary stuff. But no, I can tell you, hands down, it's not demons, which I do think are probably real. Don't think it's angels either, because I looked into that. I don't think... I would say the second most popular theory is this sort of interdimensional being, which is a theory put forth by a number of researchers who are pretty well educated, like Jacques Vallée, or John Keel, Lauren Coleman, Jerome Clark, because some of these encounters are just strange and symbolic and just so weird. It's like, really, is this aliens? I'm like, yes, it is. I think it is. And I'll tell you why. Because one, I've talked to a lot of people, and most of them, by far, think this is what they're dealing with, extraterrestrials. And secondly, it's the theory that best fits the evidence. I mean, we've got radar returns, what look like craft. I mean, they're metallic. They've got windows. They have landing struts sometimes. They land and leave burns on the ground. We've got photographs of them, films, medical evidence. People are struck by a beam of light or something and get radiation sickness. Where does that come from? And furthermore, when someone is, quote, taken on board, abducted, they're not in their bed. They're not at the bus stop. People are looking all over for them. In many cases, they're just gone. Where are they? They are somewhere, and it does not appear to be on Earth, because their family can't locate them. Their friends, they're gone. They are somewhere, and they're not here. Yeah. But really, the ET theory is so darn logical. I mean, if there are no ETs, where does that leave us as beings? Alone in the universe? We're the only biological things out there? That makes no sense at all. And
no, not at all. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And my main problem, I think, with the theory, which, I don't think there's even a really good name for it, the intelligence that sort of tracks cultures and puts on shows and pretends to be ETs. The phenomenon, I've heard it called. It's very anthropocentric. It's very much like all about us. Like, ETs are here for us, about us, generated by us. Like, that just stinks. I mean, it's too self-centered. Anything that's so, anthropocentric, I guess that's the best word for it, has been disproven throughout history.
Well, that's kind of the human way, right? Is to make everything about us all the time. I mean, that's what we do, right?
Yeah. I'm not convinced. I think the theory that best fits the evidence is extraterrestrial. And just look at the Roswell UFO crash. If that is real, and it's not just Roswell, I mean, there are hundreds of these things. And if you look into this, if you dig deep, it's pretty darn clear our military and militaries across the world have gotten a hold of these craft and the bodies. I mean, you can't go to a place and look at them. This is pretty much relying on eyewitness testimony, which is such a shame because it's the best evidence ever. But if it's true, and I'm pretty sure it is, all bets are off. We know it. It's not a mystery anymore. These are ETs, and our government knows it. They know it. Here they are saying, we're having sightings that could be clutter. It could be balloons. They could be Chinese, German,
swamp gas,
Russian.
right? Swamp gas.
They're still waffling on, and they're like, we're investigating sightings. I'm like, really simple sightings? That's what you're investigating. Shut up.
Right.
We know full on well that you've got these craft. I don't believe a word they say. We're not going to get disclosure from them. It's becoming more and more clear to me that they are not going to tell the truth until and unless they absolutely have to.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. Like, I have a friend who doesn't believe in any of it. He never has, and we've talked often about it. And whenever they first started coming out with this, releasing the footage and this and that, he's like, well, I guess it is true. The government says it is. And I'm like, man, like, why are you taking their word for it? We already knew this. And you're just waiting for confirmation from them to say what they're giving you is not even good evidence compared to what is out there. So why
Right?
would you believe that? I don't know. Like, some people, I guess, are easily, I don't know.
Hey, I get it. Our government, we're supposed to be able to trust them, but just look at their history. This is not the only subject they've lied about.
Right.
And I don't mean to be, a hater, but when it comes to UFOs, I am just going to lay it out. They've lied about it from the beginning. They knew this was real very early on and launched a publicity campaign to make UFO witnesses look like liars, drug addicts, hoaxers, stupid. Project Blue Book is a good example. J. Allen Hynek has said this. He defected. He's like, they are not putting any attention towards the good cases. And when it's something that's obviously Venus, that's what they publicize. And when something lands, they attack the witness and says, let's look for a psychological defect. Let's, search their history and see if we can find some way to discredit them. These are not nice people. I hate to say it, but they are taking the wrong path on this. And I think they're going to pay the price at some point.
Who was it? Richard? Who's the other big disinformation agent? Was it Richard? I think I get it wrong. Doty? Was it Doty or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's a disinformation artist for sure. Who's still in the whole UFO circuit, talking to people. I'm like, really, you guys? Are you going to talk to him after what we know he's done?
He admitted it, didn't he? He said,
Yeah.
yes, I'm a disinformation agent. He made, the one case, didn't that guy end up killing himself?
Yeah, Paul Benowitz. Yep.
Yeah, Benowitz.
Yep, it's quite a shame. And for people to say, UFOs aren't real, there's no cover-up, I'm like, hold on. Look at the documents released through the Freedom of Information Act. The Citizens Against UFO Secrecy sued the NSA, National Security Agency, and lost. And the judge said, no, we're not releasing these documents. The national security issue far outweighs any benefit that would be gained by releasing these documents. And what we have gotten is severely blacked out. But we know for sure that they've been hovering over military bases. Look at the Malmstrom incident.
Yeah.
I've got first-hand witness case in this latest book. He stepped forward and told his participation in this event where they actually shut down the missiles. Our government knows. They know. So any statements to the contrary are just disingenuous. They're lies.
In your opinion, what do you think the reasoning behind keeping that from us is? Because, there are lots of theories behind that too. I just want to know what you think.
Yeah, I think, a lot of researchers have kind of specialized in that aspect. I haven't, but I know Stanton Friedman did a lot of research into this. One thing is very clear. This was a policy covering up, adopted very early on, from like the Roswell incident in 1947, earlier actually, 42 even, onward. And so they've kind of painted themselves into a corner a little bit, but ultimately what it is, I think it's greed, it's power. They have a hold of this technology and they are not willing to release it. We have an oil-based economy and the military-industrial complex, 1%ers, the highest levels of the Navy, the Army, Air Force. These are the guys who are covering this up. They're not elected officials. They're in for life if they want. We can't do anything about it. They have a huge, endless black budget. So we're in a little bit of a pickle here trying to get this information out there because they are not letting it go. They have this technology. I think it's greed. Mainly, that's the main driver. I don't think it's, because the world's going to panic. I'm like, no, you guys haven't panicked. You guys know all about this and you're just fine. The people would be fine. We could handle it. We are handling it without your help. Thank you.
Right.
So
I mean, okay, so a lot of people out there also think that they have been and they are still conditioning us for a full disclosure as far as movies and TV and all that. What are your feelings on that?
It is interesting, isn't that all the top, well, not all, but like half the top grossing movies have ETs in them. That this is the number one subject in science fiction. That it's all over advertising. It's saturated video games. It's saturated our entire culture. I think there is a publicity campaign with this subject, but I think it's largely enacted by the ETs themselves, who are trying and pushing towards open official contact, which I think will happen. They are doing a very vigorous campaign to announce their presence, and have been from the very beginning, with these huge waves of sightings like Gulf Breeze or Hudson Valley, New York, or let's see, the Phoenix Lights, the Topanga Canyon wave. There's all these Belgium wave. I mean, there was a wave in France in 1954 that convinced that country for sure that this stuff is real. I mean, these ETs have been slowly escalating contact on a very sort of regular basis, hitting town after town, going to individuals, small groups, sometimes large groups, and letting it be known that they are real. They are taking a lot of people on board, not just a few. I heard a quote from Jan Hynek, 1 in 40 people have been taken on board a craft. And that was early on in my research. I'm like, hell no way. There's just not a chance. I would know somebody then who's been abducted. And that's when I started, I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask everybody. I'm going to ask everybody I know, because I think I know 50 people.
Yeah.
Or 40. And I didn't have to ask 40, actually. I found like 5 in my circle of family, friends, and coworkers who show all those markers. And the Roper organization? They are a survey organization. They do polls, and they tackled the UFO subject in 1991 and asked thousands of people a series of questions, some of which were hidden little secret questions pointing towards, are you an abductee? Meaning like, have you had missing time? Have you had a close-up UFO sighting? Do you have weird scars on your body that you can't explain? Healings or injury, balls of light in your home, all these little questions. And they found 1 in 50 people show the markers of being an abductee. So this is common. This is not,
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's not super rare.
So, let me ask you this. Let's go back to the aliens making their presence known, or the extraterrestrials making their presence known.
Yeah.
Why do you think they're taking so long to do it? Like, why do you think they're going so slow? And do you think that our government has had communications with them and maybe they worked something out that way?
I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, I do think that they went to the government first. And a really famous incident, which no one has been able to debunk, occurred at Edwards Air Force Base in February of 1954. You may have heard of this. It's a pretty wild story, but it broke immediately afterwards, after it happened, that UFOs landed at Edwards Air Force Base and had diplomatic relations with President Eisenhower, who disappeared from view for a few days there in February. The press went crazy because, they track the president's every move. One newspaper even said he's died. He died of a heart attack. They retracted it. And the president later said, oh, no, I just had a dental emergency. But researchers have been tracking this for a while, a bunch of them. And from the very beginning, reports came out that this happened, that he was there when UFOs landed, aliens came out. There was a lot of people there. Edwin Norris of the Brookings Institute, allegedly Albert Einstein, some very famous rocket scientists, people, Bishop McIntyre, a major religious leader, people from pretty much every field of society at the top level there were there. And there was, a major researcher, Gerald Light. He was the one who kind of really broke the story. But at any rate, what supposedly happened is these ETs had a conversation with President Eisenhower and other world leaders and said that we want you to stop testing nuclear power. You are ripping holes in other dimensions. You are damaging your planet. You don't know what you're messing with. And we refused to stop. And we wanted their technology. And they said, no, you're abusing technology. What you need is spiritual wisdom. And we weren't interested in that. And they said, we want to disclose. And President Eisenhower, I think he was one who was for it, but most the others were not. There was some dissension about that. But ultimately, our government decided not to disclose ET presence because they were ready. They wanted to disclose. They actually took him on board a UFO, gave him a ride, showed him how they can turn their craft invisible. There's been a lot of research into this. And most of the researchers who have looked into it have credited it as a real event. And I'd looked deeply into it when I wrote a book, UFOs Over California, and I was shocked. Edwards Air Force Base is UFO central. It's not just that one event. All kinds of stuff is going on there with, reverse engineering craft and sightings and landings, and it goes on and on. But I'll tell you, I'd like to see the footage of that. I know there's footage of that Eisenhower deal. I know there is. Yep, one of the witnesses who was there said that footage was taken. Wow. And that's what I'd like to see in this upcoming, 70-page disclosure report that's supposed to be forthcoming. We had 6 pages of pure nonsense. Yeah. And they're like, we have no evidence that this is extraterrestrial. I'm like, yes, you do. You're lying. When you say that, that's a flat-out lie. So there is, I think, there was an effort to disclose, and we did not take that opportunity. And that's when the ETs conducted what amounts to a grassroots campaign and are going from person to person. I found some really interesting cases that sort of point towards this. That case in Rua, Zimbabwe, where UFOs landed at Ariel Elementary School?
Yeah, that's a great case.
Right? It's an amazing case. Some 200 kids on the playground. Like over 60 of them saw this craft land. Beings came out, communicated with some, but it's not unique. There's also the Hillsdale College incident. There was an incident at Brookhaven Elementary School in Wales. There was a case in Florida, Crestview Elementary School. And I started looking into it, and I found over 100 cases, no kidding, 100, where they are hovering over schools or landing. This is during the day. These are not brief flybys. These are long-lasting sightings. 30% of the cases, they're landing next to the school, flat out landing, and humanoids are being seen. This is part of their campaign to announce their presence. Very clever. They're doing it to elementary age students who are really impressionable, have no judgment on UFOs. Probably most of them have never heard of that term even.
Yeah.
So
that is clever.
Yeah, and I think it's been very effective to convince the younger generation, certainly, that this is real. And I did a whole book on that. Yeah.
Do you feel like they're doing it this way as opposed to just... Because I've had this discussion with people before, and they say, well, I mean, if they've got that technology and they've got that much this and that, then why don't they just land and one day all land all their ships right here and say, here we are, and then we'd all know. And I said, well, because we as humans are warring people, and we would probably all start shooting at them, and it probably wouldn't turn out well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main things. In fact, I'm convinced it is, because that's what the contactees I'm interviewing have been told, that we are far too warlike, far too judgmental, far too shoot first, ask questions later, and that it would cause damage to our society. And they have tried similar incidents. I mean, remember in 1954, no coincidence there, they came down over the White House. Seriously. Yeah. And everyone saw them. This was on radar. We've talked to the people, researchers have, who were there and saw this on their scopes. Talked to the people who were in the planes vectored after them to try to intercept them. And basically, we tried to shoot at them and they took off. But they are doing this campaign in a way that is going to gently get us used to their presence. So that those who are mired in skepticism or, mired in fundamentalist religious beliefs or just not willing to look at the evidence don't lose their minds when this does happen. Because I think it will. I think we are moving towards this, and it could be real soon.
I think they're actually forcing the government's hand in doing some of this right now. And they're ultimately going to end up making them come forward with it by doing this.
Yep, I totally agree. Funny you say that, because that's the conclusion I've come to, that, why is the government not now disclosing what's in it for them? Because they don't usually do stuff for the benefit of humanity. I mean, look at the civil rights movement. That was not embraced by our government.
Right.
This was something that they were basically forced to do because there was so much civil unrest. And it's sort of the same thing with this UFO movement. I think they know, they have been told that the ETs are not going to stand for this. And will put on a display that is absolutely indisputable. Just think if the Phoenix Lights happened in today's times instead of 94, 97?
I think it was 94.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I can't remember.
Somewhere around there, March 94, I think it was. But at any rate, that was just prior to cell phones. That happened now? Woof. Man. Yeah. And I think it will. I think that because we have these major waves every 5-10 years somewhere in the world, whether it's the US or Mexico City had a wave in 91. That was crazy. This was during the solar eclipse. Again, I think they did that on purpose because a lot of people are outside, they're looking up at the sky, and what happens? This silver saucer appears over Mexico City and is filmed by some 30 different witnesses all over the city. And Mexico was forced to be much more forthcoming.
Oh yeah, they're full in with it, aren't they?
I'm not going to say full in, but yeah, they had to because they couldn't say it's not real when everyone there knows it's real. They saw it. They've got the evidence. And that's going to I don't think the U.S. is going to be the one that does the big disclosure. It's going to be...
Who do you think that'll be?
Well, Chile, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, France. I don't know.
Chile's probably a big one. Probably up there.
I don't think it's going to be China or England or U.S. or Russia, which are, sort of the big players here. But I don't know. What could happen is someone going to get a hold of evidence. I think it's to their benefit. Honestly, I do. 'Cause they want to remain in control of this subject. They want to remain in control of people's perception of it. And if they don't disclose, they will lose all credibility. And that's another driving force behind disclosure.
That's the truth.
Yep.
What I'm waiting for is, and I know this is going to happen, and I know that I've heard you speak about this before, but I've been thinking this to myself and saying it to friends of mine for years. When are we going to get that footage of an actual abduction happening, or someone being on one of these vessels that have their cell phone with them?
I am waiting for that. I think it's gonna happen. So far, the ETs have been very, very careful about how much they've allowed themselves to be photographed. I can't tell you how many cases I've investigated where cameras have been shut off, or people have a camera and they just forget. There was a case in '84 on Catalina Island with 11 witnesses, and 4 of them were photographers. And many of them there was at least 6 of them had cameras. They had flashlights, they had watches. And what happened was, this UFO comes swooping down and, hovers there for over an hour. And at some point, someone looks at their watch. It's like, my watch stopped at 8:15, and everyone starts looking at their watches. All their watches stopped. They grabbed their flashlights. None of their flashlights would work. They go get their cameras. Every single camera would not function. I had a case as recent as 2006. I think it was 2006. And this was involving a group of Boy Scouts. Just happened to be on Catalina Island again, where there's a lot of activity. And two of the cell phone cameras, the cases where I know of that people lifted them up and tried to photograph it, were powered down.
Wow.
I talked to another guy in Virginia. He had a brand new digital camera. UFO's right there, right overhead. He points it towards this object. Boom. The camera goes right down to 0 power. Moves it away, goes right back up. Points the viewfinder at the UFO, right down. Did this 4 or 5 times. Like, well, they're not going to let me take a picture of it. But at some point, they have let people take pictures of them. There are a number of contactees who've gotten really good photographs. And sometimes people are just there and they take great pictures. So I think it's coming. Someone's going to take their cell phone camera on board a UFO. I think our government probably has footage of this.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know how this is all going to roll out. And I hate to speculate because, boy, once you start speculating...
Yeah. So why do you think they're visiting? What are they visiting us for? What is their purpose?
Well, yeah, I've looked into this because they seem to be obsessed with humans. I mean, obsessed with all things Earth, all things human. And we know, if you look at the evidence, it's pretty clear they've been around a very long time. I mean, millennia. Just look at Egyptian hieroglyphs. Look at the ancient Vinyanas of ancient Egypt or India. Look at medieval wood carvings. Look at petroglyphs.
Yeah, biblical tapestries. I mean,
the whole deal.
They're in there.
Yeah, so we know they've been around a long time, but never in quite the numbers they are since 1947. The modern age of UFOs, Roswell, the atomic age. This is when we really started doing atomic research. And boom, they come in large numbers. 1947, that summer of the Roswell crash, of the Kenneth Arnold sighting, we labeled this the modern age of UFOs because there was a huge superwave which swept across the US and the world of these objects, which had sort of started trickling in earlier than that, the Foo Fighters and all of this, but really sort of ramped up in a big way in 1947, pretty much precisely, and hasn't stopped. So I think that is not a coincidence. A number of researchers have pointed to this. It's the atomics. That's what drew them in. That's what brought them in large numbers. That's what made them pay attention to these humans who are messing around with a force that they don't understand and has the potential to completely kill everyone on Earth, and perhaps, according to the contactees I've spoken with, and certainly this is borne out by other people's research, cause damage in other dimensions, in other areas we're not even aware of.
That makes sense.
So I think that's one of the draws. One I think is probably they've been watching us a very, very, very long time, and perhaps upgrading us or genetically intervening, certainly. So the whole hybrid baby phenomena, not so sure that's new. I don't know. We haven't had the population of Earth wasn't super educated in terms of reading and writing and recording this sort of thing. So this could have been going on for a lot longer than how it appears, which is, the 40s and 50s and 60s. But at any rate, it does appear they're genetically intervening and really are interested in hybridizing with us, particularly the Greys. And that makes me wonder if they have an investment going on here with the human species. Because apparently being human is super special. They love us. They know more about us physically than we do. They're very interested in our emotions. They're very interested in all things human. They are obsessed with us. I am not sure why, but I think part of it is that we probably have a closer relationship with them than we realize. I mean, don't forget there are human-looking ETs out there. Human-looking. What does that mean about us? I mean, did we even evolve on this planet? I'm not so sure we did. And if the Greys are interbreeding with us, what exactly is our relationship with them? And I think the Greys are essentially human. This is what I'm learning from contactees.
That's what I think too. I believe that too. That there may be us from the future, like the Greys, anyway.
Well, they do seem to be able to do time travel. We know that. I mean, people are taken into the past. They've taken to the future, seen future events. I am not convinced they're necessarily us from the future. But there are some cases you can march out to support that theory. They have told, there are a few cases that I wonder. But if you look at all the cases in general, a number of people have been told, no, the Greys come from Orion. They come from Zeta Reticuli. It's mostly Greys, by the way. Most of the people I talk to, I'm going to say at least 50%, could be as high as 70%, will describe Greys if they, claim to have ET contact. It's, well, they were short, large dark eyes, pale skin, diminutive features, bald, wearing jumpsuits. Greys. But there's praying mantis, there's human looking, there's another category I call strange humanoids, because let's face it, some are just unique. You hear about them once and never again. Just weird 10-foot tall beings, or short humanoids, or just uniquely described. Very strange. One lady I interviewed who had a schoolyard encounter at Point Elementary in St. Louis, Missouri in 1966, had a UFO land next to her school. She and her fellow classmates all saw it. And there was a humanoid right up next to them, not far away, like 10 feet. And she was very interested, have I heard of description like the one she gave me. I'm like, well, not really. She described this sort of, it was short, had large dark eyes. That's very common. Bald. But was very muscular looking and had a face more like a gorilla, she said.
Interesting.
Dark skinned, wearing a jumpsuit, but just not quite like I've ever heard before. And I get that a lot. I mean, I would say that that's fairly consistent. Well, yeah, mostly grays, but then again, there's a lot of different types of grays too. Anywhere from these 3 foot tall, really kind of emotionless, almost hive-minded type automatons or androids even, to taller, sort of willowy, more emotional grays, 4 to 5 feet tall, to even, upwards of 6 feet. Grays still. One lady I interviewed, she was at the office where I work as a bookkeeper. I've worked there for years and years and years. Because I do have to work to make a living, just so you know.
Yeah.
And she walks into my office. I don't preach about UFOs at work, but the word gets out. And I hadn't told Connie, is her name, even though I'd worked with her for, had to be 10 years. She walks into my office and someone had just given me a little statuette of a gray, which I propped up there in front of my desk, in front of my computer. And Connie looks at it and gets really wide-eyed and actually lets out this little shriek, points to it and says, "What the heck is that?" I'm like, "Connie, what do you mean, what's that? That's a gray. You know what grays are, right?" And she's like, "Oh my God, really? Like, that's an alien?" I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "Well, I saw one of those." I'm like, "Really? What happened?"
Wow.
Yeah, she described this incredible encounter. She lived in Pacoima, I think, at the time. Pretty crowded suburb, had just had her baby. Her baby was a week old. That put up a red flag for me. I'm like, how many times have I heard this? They come right when a lady is 9 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant, or just had her baby. Shoot, it happened to my sister. Had just had her baby when this UFO shows up. But yeah, Connie's woke up and her baby is sleeping in his crib next to the big picture window there. I put this in one of my books, Inside UFOs. But long story short, she wakes up because she hears the squeaky sound on the window, like someone rubbing their fingers on the window. She looks up and there's a 6 foot tall gray trying to open the window and trying to get to her baby.
That's creepy.
Right? She's screamed, and it's trying to open a window that doesn't open, by the way. Like, this is a stupid gray if it can't figure out that there's no hinges on this window. And why isn't it walking through the wall? I don't know.
Yeah, because they usually do that, right?
Right, exactly. So I don't know. It's weird, but it's like right there staring at her baby. She leans up in bed and screams, and it looks right at her. They lock gazes, and she realized this thing is not human. Well, she knew that from the very beginning, but now she saw for sure. And it slams her back into the bed. Boom. Without any tools or anything, just stares at her, and boom, she's paralyzed. Can't cry out. All she can do is feel the tears streaming from her, her eyes. And this thing keeps trying to open the window for another 30 seconds, a minute. Finally just walks off. Crazy.
That is crazy. Has she had any encounters since then?
No, of course, that was the first thing I asked her. This was a one-off, as near as I can tell, and that's very unusual. Because generally when someone has something like this happen, they had, these guys coming into their bedroom as a little kid, or their parents will have had an encounter. But after questioning her for a long time, she's like, no, nothing. Her son never did. She told her husband immediately. He's like, honey, you must have been dreaming. She's like, I wasn't dreaming. I'm going to stay with my mom. and she left for 2 weeks or a week or so, and finally came back and says, can we get some guard dogs? And he's like, sure, fine, whatever, we'll get you back in the house. And they did. They got guard dogs, and she says, honey, I want to move. Let's move. They did. They moved away. But
Can't blame her.
it was a one-off. Very strange.
Well, that about does it for Dreamland tonight, dreamers. Thanks again for listening, and good night.